I thought I was the smartest being in the Galactic Assembly. Today I am hiding in a ventilation shaft, listening to the screams of my colleagues echoing through what used to be our most secure facility. The irony is not lost on me that the very creatures we summoned to save us might be the ones to end everything we have ever known. My name is Crix Val, Senior Tactical Summoner of the Hegemony Defense Corps, and I have made what historians will probably call the most catastrophic mistake in galactic history. If there are any historians left to write about it, that is, it started with desperation, as most terrible decisions do. The Krillian Empire had been pushing deeper into our territory for 18 standard months, their biomechanical horrors tearing through our defensive lines like they were made of paper. Our plasma cannons barely scratched their adaptive armor. Our psionic warfare specialists were being turned into drooling vegetables by their mind scramblers. And our allies, well, let us just say that when the Centaurian collective suddenly developed a very urgent need to inspect their home systems, we knew we were alone. High Command was in full panic mode. Admiral Zoyer Mar had already started drafting surrender terms when someone remembered the old summoning protocols buried deep in our archives. Ancient technology, they said. Theoretical at best, but desperate times, as they say, call for desperate measures. The concept was simple enough, which should have been our first warning. Open a dimensional rift, reach into another reality, and pull through a species capable of military assistance. The calculations showed we could summon beings from what the computers classified as mild aggression worlds, creatures that could fight but would be manageable once the threat was eliminated. How were we supposed to know that our targeting system had a glitch? How were we supposed to know that Terra would translate as a mild aggression world when it was actually classified as a Class 12 death world in every other galactic database? I still remember the moment everything went wrong. We had gathered in the Grand Summoning Chamber, a massive cylindrical room with walls lined with energy conduits and reality warping apparatus. 12 of our best summoners, including myself, stood around the central platform where the dimensional anchor would manifest our salvation. Initiating primary sequence, announced Dr. Yelp9, our lead researcher, her 3 eyes glowing with excitement. Target coordinates locked, scanning for suitable subjects. The air began to shimmer, reality bending like heated metal. Purple energy crackled between the anchor points as our machines reached across the void between dimensions. On the main display, we could see data streaming in about our potential allies. Species designation: human, Dr. Yelp9 read aloud. Bipedal, carbon-based, average height 1.7 meters. Technological level: early spacefaring, aggression index, moderate. Combat capability, standard. Perfect, we thought. Manageable, controllable, useful. We were expecting perhaps a dozen warriors, maybe 20 if we were lucky. Beings who would be grateful for the summoning, eager to help and easy to send back once the Krillians were dealt with. The portal stabilized with a sound like reality tearing through the swirling vortex. We caught glimpses of blue skies and green landscapes. Peaceful, serene, exactly what we wanted. Then the first human stepped through. His name, we later learned, was Marcus Kane, though at the time all we saw was a creature that looked deceptively fragile. Pale skin, dark hair, wearing some kind of primitive fabric covering. He took one look around our chamber, assessed the 12 heavily armed aliens surrounding him, and did something that should have told us everything we needed to know about what we had just unleashed. He smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a confused smile, but the kind of smile that a predator gives just before it strikes. His eyes, those terrifying human eyes that seemed to look right through our souls, swept across our group with calculating precision. Well, Marcus said in a voice that somehow managed to sound both casual and menacing. This is interesting. Military installation, alien species, dimensional summoning technology. Either I am having the most vivid hallucination of my life, or you guys just made a very serious mistake. Before any of us could respond, more humans began stepping through the portal. One by one they emerged from that tier in reality, and with each arrival I felt my confidence drain away like atmosphere through a hull breach. Sarah Mitchell came through next. A female with short yellow hair and scars across her arms that spoke of violence survived. She took in our summoning chamber with the practiced eye of someone who had seen battlefields before. Military pickup, she asked Marcus, as if being yanked across dimensions was a routine Tuesday occurrence. Looks like it, Marcus replied, never taking his eyes off us. Though I am thinking these folks might not have read our species file very carefully. Then came David Torres, massive even by human standards, with hands that looked like they could crush our skulls without effort. Behind him, Elena Vasquez, who somehow managed to make standing still look like a threat. Then Jake Morrison, whose casual inspection of our security systems made me very uncomfortable. And finally, Amy Cooper, who took one look at our weapons and actually laughed. 6 humans. We had summoned 6 humans, and they were acting like this was some kind of routine deployment rather than an impossible cross-dimensional abduction. So, Marcus said, stepping forward with that same predatory smile, who wants to explain why we are here? And please, make it good. We left some very important business unfinished back home. Dr. Yelp9, bless her naive heart, stepped forward with what I am sure she thought was an authoritative posture. Greetings, warriors of Terra. We have summoned you to aid us in our time of greatest need. The Krillian Empire threatens our civilization, and we require your assistance to defend our people. The humans exchanged glances, and I swear I saw Marcus's smile get wider. You summoned us, Sarah repeated slowly, as if testing the words. From our world, to fight in your war. Yes, Dr. Yelp9 confirmed proudly. Our analysis indicated that your species possesses suitable combat capabilities while maintaining manageable aggression levels. We offer you honor, glory, and substantial rewards for your service. That was when Amy started laughing. Actually laughing, a sound that somehow managed to be more terrifying than any war cry I had ever heard. Manageable aggression levels, she repeated between chuckles. Did you hear that, Marcus? They think we have manageable aggression levels. I heard, Marcus replied, and now his smile was starting to show teeth. Tell me, Doctor, what did you say your name was? Dr. Yelp9, Senior Researcher of Dimensional Sciences. Dr. Yelp9. When you were doing your research on humanity, did you happen to look into our history at all? Our wars, perhaps? Our conflicts? Dr. Yelp9's middle eye blinked uncertainly. We conducted a standard tactical assessment. Your species shows typical territorial behavior and standard defensive capabilities. David Torres let out a low whistle. Standard defensive capabilities. Jesus, Marcus. They really do not know, do they? Know what? Dr. Yelp9 asked, and I could hear the first note of uncertainty creeping into her voice. Marcus took another step forward, and every one of my combat instincts started screaming at me to run. Doc, let me ask you something. In your research, did you happen to come across any references to what we call total war? The concept of conflict where civilian populations become legitimate targets, where entire industrial bases are converted to military production, where we burn entire continents to deny them to our enemies. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the realization starting to dawn on Dr. Yelp9's face, all 3 of her eyes widening in growing horror. Or maybe, Elena added conversationally, you came across our nuclear weapons? Those little devices we built specifically for erasing cities from existence? We have got about 14,000 of those. Last time I checked. 14,000? Squeaked Junior Summoner Tickpaw from behind me. Jake Morrison nodded cheerfully. Oh yes, and that is just the big ones. We have got all sorts of fun toys, chemical weapons, biological weapons, kinetic impactors, quantum torpedoes. Humans are very creative when it comes to finding new ways to kill things. But, Dr. Yelp9 stammered, but your aggression index only rated as moderate. Your technological level is early spacefaring. You should be manageable. Amy stopped laughing, and somehow that was worse than when she had been making noise. Manageable, she repeated, her voice flat and cold. You pulled 6 soldiers away from active combat operations, dragged us across dimensions without asking, and thought we would be manageable. Active combat operations. I found myself asking before I could stop myself. World War III, Marcus explained helpfully. Been going on for about 6 months now. Started when the Beijing coalition decided they wanted Australia's water rights. Escalated when the European Federation got involved. Really heated up when someone nuked Singapore. You are in the middle of a world war. Dr. Yelp9's voice was barely a whisper. Oh, it is not just a world war anymore, Sarah corrected. It went interplanetary last week when the Mars colonies declared independence and started dropping asteroids on Earth. That is actually where we were when you yanked us out, middle of a boarding action against a coalition dreadnought. The blood in my veins turned to ice. These were not the manageable, grateful allies we had expected. These were creatures literally pulled from an active war zone on a planet that was apparently trying to kill itself. Now, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a tone that made my scales itch. I want you to think very carefully about your next words, Dr. Yelp9. Because my team and I are starting to get the impression that this was not exactly a voluntary recruitment. We needed help, Dr. Yelp9 said weakly. The Krillians are destroying everything. They will genocide our entire species if we cannot stop them. And you thought kidnapping would be a good recruitment strategy? David asked, cracking his knuckles in a way that made sounds I did not know organic material could make. It was summoning, insisted Dr. Yelp9. Ancient protocols, perfectly legal under Galactic Assembly regulations. The look that passed between the 6 humans at that moment made me wish I had never been hatched. It was the look of predators who had just realized they were not the prey they had been taken for. Galactic Assembly, Marcus repeated slowly. So there is a whole government out here. Laws, regulations, established procedures for interdimensional kidnapping. It is not kidnapping, Dr. Yelp9 protested, but her voice was getting weaker with every word. What would you call it? Elena asked, her hand resting on some kind of device attached to her belt that I was suddenly very sure was a weapon. We will return you to your world once the threat is neutralized. With rewards. With honor. After we fight your war for you, Jake clarified. Yes. Another one of those looks passed between the humans. This time I saw something in their expressions that made my blood run cold. They were not just angry. They were calculating. Tell me about these Krillians, Marcus said, his voice suddenly businesslike. What are we dealing with? Numbers. Technology. Tactics. Dr. Yelp9's relief was pathetic to see. They are a biomechanical hybrid species. Adaptive armor plating, rapid regeneration capabilities, psionic warfare specialists. They have been systematically conquering systems for the past 2 years. Their technology is approximately 15% more advanced than our own. 15%, Amy repeated thoughtfully. Biomechanical, psionics, rapid regeneration. She looked at her teammates. Sound familiar to anyone? Beijing Collective used biomech interfaces, David noted. Before we figured out how to fry their neural networks with targeted EMPs, and the Martian separatists had regenerative medical tech, Sarah added, until we started using acid-based munitions. Psionics are just another form of electronic warfare, Jake concluded. Same principles, different medium. I watched this exchange with growing dread. They were not intimidated by our enemies. They were analyzing them, categorizing them, already planning how to kill them. How many ships do they have? Marcus asked. Current estimates suggest approximately 2,000 combat vessels, Dr. Yelp9 replied, some of her confidence returning. Our own fleet numbers about 800. 2,000, Elena mused. Remember the Titan blockade, Marcus? When the coalition had us outnumbered 3-1. I remember, Marcus replied. I also remember how that ended for them. He looked back at Dr. Yelp9. What kind of ships are we talking about? Size, armament, crew complement. As Dr. Yelp9 began describing the Krillian fleet composition, I realized with growing horror that we had not summoned allies. We had summoned something far worse. We had summoned humans in the middle of their own war. Humans who were treating our desperate struggle for survival like just another tactical problem to solve. Humans who spoke casually about nuclear weapons and planetary bombardment and city-killing devices. And the worst part? They were actually interested in helping us. Not out of altruism, not out of gratitude for being summoned to our aid. but because we had just presented them with what they clearly saw as an interesting military challenge. I should have run then. I should have triggered the emergency evacuation protocols and gotten as far away from those 6 terrifying creatures as possible. Instead, I stayed to watch, and what I saw over the next few hours would haunt me for the rest of my hopefully very long life. Because it turned out that when humans say they are going to help you win a war, they mean they are going to help you win it in the most efficient, brutal, and absolutely terrifying way possible, and they were just getting started. 6 hours after the summoning, I watched Marcus Kane take command of our entire military operation with the casual efficiency of someone ordering lunch. The fact that he had no official authority, no knowledge of our command structure, and technically no right to even be in our war room, seemed to matter exactly zero to him. "This is your current defensive perimeter?" he asked, pointing at our holographic battle display with what I was beginning to recognize as dangerous interest. Admiral Zong Moore, who had been planning military campaigns since before I was spawned, nodded nervously. "Yes. We have fortified positions at these 12 key systems, with fallback positions here and here." Marcus studied the display for exactly 15 seconds. Then he started laughing. "You are kidding me," he said, looking around at our senior command staff like we were particularly slow children. "Please tell me this is a joke." "I fail to see the humor," Admiral Zongmore replied stiffly. "These positions have been carefully selected based on strategic value and defensive capability." "Defensive capability," Sarah repeated from where she was examining our weapons specifications on a secondary console. "Admiral, with respect, your entire strategy is based on the assumption that your enemy is going to politely attack you exactly where you want them to. Our intelligence indicates that the Krillians prefer direct assault tactics," protested General Kix Prime, our senior tactical officer. David Torres looked up from the fleet composition data he had been studying. "Your intelligence is wrong. Or more accurately, your intelligence is about to become completely irrelevant." "What do you mean?" I found myself asking. Elena answered while never taking her eyes off the real-time strategic display. "You have been fighting a defensive war for 18 months? Static positions, predetermined fallback points, reactive strategies. Your enemy has learned to read you like a children's book." "But," Dr. Yelpa-9 interjected, "our defensive positions are mathematically optimal. Our computers have run millions of scenarios." "Your computers," Jake said, pulling up what looked like our entire communications network architecture, "are about to become the least of your problems." "Amy, you seeing this encryption standard?" Amy glanced over from where she had been studying our weapons manufacturing data. "Late-stage quantum entanglement with static key rotation? Yeah, I can crack that in my sleep. Give me 20 minutes and I will have their entire network mapped." The silence that followed was the kind that usually precedes very bad news. "You can break Krillian encryption?" Admiral Zockmort asked in a voice that had gone very small. "Honey?" Amy said with a grin that made my scales shed involuntarily. "We cracked quantum encryption when I was in high school. This is like asking if I can break a padlock with a plasma torch." Marcus clapped his hands together, a sound that made everyone in the room jump. "Right then, here is what we are going to do. Amy, I want full network infiltration within the hour. Jake, start working on disrupting their supply lines. Sarah, you and David are going to help me redesign their entire defensive strategy. Elena, you get the fun job." "Which is?" Elena asked, though her smile suggested she already knew she was going to enjoy it. "You get to show them what real psychological warfare looks like." I should have stopped them then. I should have invoked emergency protocols, declared martial law, anything to prevent what was about to happen. But the truth was, we were desperate. The Krillians had been systematically destroying our colonies for over a year, and nothing we tried had even slowed them down. So I watched, and what I watched still gives me nightmares. The first sign that everything had changed came 8 hours later, when our long-range sensors detected a massive Krillian assault fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima 7 system. 47 warships, including 3 of their massive biomechanical dreadnoughts. It was the largest force they had deployed since the war began. "Standard attack pattern," observed General Kix Prime. "They will establish a blockade, begin systematic bombardment of the outer colonies, then advance on the primary naval base. No, Marcus said quietly, studying the tactical display with those terrifying human eyes. They will not. I do not understand, Admiral Zorkmore replied. This is their established doctrine. They have used this exact strategy in every previous engagement. Marcus turned to Amy, who was sitting at what used to be our primary communications console but now looked like something from a nightmare. She had somehow connected 17 different monitoring devices to our systems, and data was streaming across her screens faster than my eyes could follow. How are we doing on that network infiltration? Marcus asked. Already in, Amy replied cheerfully. Would you like to listen to their command frequency? They are having the most interesting conversation about supply shortages. She touched something and suddenly the war room was filled with translated Krillian voices. I recognized the biomechanical harmonics immediately. These were their ship commanders talking in real time. Resupply convoy is delayed again. One voice was saying. Biomass processors are running at 30% efficiency. Third time this cycle, another replied. Command is displeased with the logistics failures. Primary assault formation is ready, a third voice cut in. Beginning standard advance on defensive positions. Marcus smiled, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. Jake, he said casually, those supply convoys they just mentioned. Where might those be right now? Jake looked up from his own console where he had somehow gained access to what looked like the entire Krillian supply network. 17 light-years from here, moving through the Kepler Junction. Lightly defended, mostly automated cargo vessels. Lightly defended, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. How lightly? 6 escort frigates, standard defensive screens. They are expecting routine transit through secured space. David cracked his knuckles again, a sound that had not gotten any less disturbing. Want me to take a team? Take 2 teams, Marcus replied. And David, make it messy. I want every other supply convoy in their network to hear about what happened and start jumping at shadows. Wait, Admiral Zophomore interrupted. You cannot attack their supply lines. They are 17 light-years away in heavily patrolled space. It would be suicide. For you, maybe, Elena said, already pulling up ship specifications. Which of these rust buckets is your fastest? The ISS Starwind is our newest scout vessel, I found myself answering. Prototype drive system, advanced stealth capabilities. Elena studied the technical specifications for about 30 seconds. This thing is a joke. Top speed is barely 7 times light velocity, and your stealth system is based on passive signature masking. She looked at her teammates. Think we can work with this? Give me an hour with the drive systems, Jake replied. I can probably squeeze another 30% out of the engines. And I can upgrade the stealth capabilities, Amy added. These idiots are still using electromagnetic cloaking. Throw in some quantum phase shifting and they will never see us coming. Admiral Zorkmore was staring at them like they had suggested rewriting the laws of physics. You cannot simply upgrade our most advanced systems in an hour. Watch us, Sarah said, already heading for the door. David, grab your gear. We are going hunting. As the humans began to file out of the war room, leaving behind a group of shell-shocked alien military officers, Marcus paused at the door. Oh, and Admiral, he said, not bothering to turn around, you might want to move your defensive fleets away from those predetermined positions. In about 6 hours, they are going to be very unhealthy places to be. But Admiral Zorkmore protested. If we abandon our defensive positions, the Krillians will have clear access to our core systems. Marcus did turn around then, and his smile was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Admiral, he said patiently, in 6 hours the Krillians are going to have much bigger problems than our defensive positions. He left. They all left, scattering throughout our facility like some kind of technological plague, and within minutes I could hear the sounds of major modifications being made to systems that had taken us decades to build. That was when Admiral Zorkmore turned to me, his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been panic. Kriksval, he said quietly. What have we done? I did not have an answer for him. I was too busy watching our sensor displays. where the Krillian assault fleet was beginning their approach exactly as General Kix Prime had predicted. 47 ships moving in perfect formation toward our outer defensive perimeter. They had no idea what was coming for them. 3 hours later, the ISS Starwind departed our base with David Torres and a hand-picked team of what I was now thinking of as human-modified volunteers. Our own people, but somehow they had been transformed in the space of a few hours into something that moved like predators and talked like they were looking forward to violence. I watched the ship disappear into hyperspace with drives that now glowed with energies I did not recognize, protected by stealth systems that made our sensors completely unable to track them. "Where did they go?" Admiral Zothmore asked. "Haunting," Elena replied from her position at what used to be our psychological warfare console but now looked like something designed to break minds. "They will be back in a few hours." "Probably." "Probably?" Elena's smile was somehow worse than Marcus's. "Depends on how much fun David has. He tends to get carried away when he is allowed to be creative." The Krillian assault fleet reached our outer perimeter exactly on schedule. 47 ships advancing in perfect formation, ready to begin their systematic destruction of our defenses. That was when Amy pressed a button on her console, and everything changed. "Broadcasting on all Krillian frequencies," she announced cheerfully. "Gentlemen, you might want to listen to this." The speakers crackled to life, filled with panicked Krillian voices. "Supply convoy 7 Alpha is gone," one voice was screaming. "Complete destruction. No survivors." "Convoy 7 Alpha?" another voice replied in confusion. "That is impossible. 7 Alpha is in secured space, 17 light-years from any combat zone." "Gone," the first voice repeated. "Atomized. Whatever hit them left nothing but debris and radiation signatures we have never seen before." I watched the tactical display as the perfect Krillian formation began to waver. Ships started falling out of line. Commanders demanding updates, requesting clarification. "That is impossible," came another voice. "No enemy vessels were detected in that region." "Tell that to the 17 ships that are now space dust," the panicked voice shot back. And the message they left carved into the hull of the only surviving escape pod. "What message?" Amy turned up the volume, and even through the mechanical distortion of Krillian biotech, I could hear the fear in the alien commander's voice. "It says, 'Regards from Terra, we are just getting started.'" The Krillian fleet stopped advancing. For the first time in the 18 months since this war began, a Krillian assault force had stopped moving forward. "Multiple convoy reports coming in," Amy continued, her fingers dancing across her modified console. "Supply lines throughout their network are reporting attacks. Fast, brutal, completely devastating." "How many teams did you send?" I asked Marcus. "One," he replied casually. "David just has very high standards when it comes to psychological impact." On the tactical display, I watched 47 Krillian warships begin an emergency retreat. The most powerful assault force they had ever deployed, turning around and running back to wherever they had come from. "They are retreating," Admiral Zoingmore said in a voice filled with wonder. "After 18 months of constant advance, they are actually retreating." "Of course they are," Sarah said, looking up from her analysis of our fleet compositions. "Their supply lines are under attack by an unknown enemy using technology they have never seen before. Their commanders are probably terrified that this is the opening move of a much larger offensive." "Is it?" I asked. The look that passed between the 6 humans made my blood freeze all over again. "That depends," Marcus said thoughtfully, "on how quickly they decide to escalate." "Escalate?" Admiral Zockmore repeated. "They are going to analyze what happened to their convoys," Elena explained patiently. "They are going to realize that the attacks were too precise, too coordinated, too advanced to be random raids. They are going to conclude that they are facing a new enemy with capabilities they do not understand." "And then?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. Jake looked up from his console where he had been monitoring something that made lights blink in patterns that hurt my eyes to watch. "Then they are going to do what any rational military force would do when facing an unknown threat, which is..." Amy's grin was pure predator. "They are going to bring everything they have got and try to end this war as quickly as possible." "Everything?" Admiral Zornbur whispered. "Battle fleets, support vessels, planetary assault forces, their entire military infrastructure." Marcus confirmed. They are going to throw everything they have at this sector, trying to eliminate what they think is an existential threat to their empire. The war room fell silent except for the hum of modified alien technology and the sound of my own racing heartbeat. How many ships? I asked. Marcus consulted something on his display. Amy, what does their network intelligence suggest for total fleet strength? Approximately 8,000 combat vessels, Amy replied cheerfully, plus support infrastructure, mobile shipyards, supply networks, and about 12 million ground troops. 8,000 ships, 12 million troops. Everything the Krillian Empire had built over decades of conquest, coming here to eliminate what they thought was a new threat to their existence. Coming here to face 6 humans who had been accidentally pulled out of their own war and were now treating our galactic conflict like an interesting technical challenge. You planned this, I realized, looking at Marcus with something that might have been respect if it had not been mixed with absolute terror. You knew they would escalate. Of course, Marcus replied. It is basic military psychology. When faced with an unknown threat, most species will either retreat completely or commit everything to eliminating it. The Krillians have spent too much time building their empire to retreat, so they will bring everything they have, Admiral Zoak Morn said slowly. Everything, Sarah confirmed. Which means that in about 72 hours we are going to face the largest military force in galactic history. We cannot possibly survive that, I protested. 8,000 ships against our 800. It will be a massacre. The humans exchanged another one of those looks, and I realized with growing dread that they were not concerned about facing impossible odds. They were excited about it. Kriksval, Marcus said, his voice taking on that patient tone that somehow made everything worse. Has anyone ever explained to you the human concept of a target-rich environment? And that was when I finally understood why I was now hiding in a ventilation shaft, listening to the screams of my colleagues echoing through what used to be our most secure facility. Because when humans say they are going to help you win a war, they do not mean they are going to help you survive it. They mean they are going to help you end it. Permanently. 71 hours and 37 minutes after Marcus Kane had smiled that predatory smile in our summoning chamber, I watched 8,000 Krillian warships drop out of hyperspace at the edge of our home system. The largest military armada in recorded galactic history, bristling with biomechanical weapons that could crack planets and psionic warfare devices that could drive entire populations insane. They had come to eliminate what they believed was an existential threat to their empire. They had absolutely no idea how right they were. I was still hiding in the ventilation shaft where I had been for the past 6 hours, ever since the humans had politely but firmly suggested that all non-essential personnel should find somewhere safe to wait. The screaming I had been hearing was not from violence, as I had initially feared, but from our own engineers who were watching the humans modify our most advanced systems in ways that apparently violated several laws of physics. Temporal displacement drives. I had heard Dr. Yelp 9 shriek just before I decided that hiding was the better part of valor. You cannot just wire temporal displacement drives into our navigation systems. The paradox equations alone would what? Amy had replied cheerfully. Create localized time distortions. Yeah, that is kind of the point. So I hid. And from my ventilation shaft I had a perfect view of the main command center, where 6 humans were calmly preparing to face the combined might of the Krillian Empire with what I could only describe as enthusiasm. Final count is 8,237 combat vessels, Jake reported from his position at what used to be our sensor array but now looked like something that belonged in a fever dream, plus support infrastructure, mobile command stations, and approximately 40 planetary assault platforms. 40 planetary assault platforms, Elena repeated thoughtfully. Those are the things that can sterilize entire worlds, right? According to the specs. Yes, Admiral Zoig Moore confirmed weakly. He had not left the command center since the humans had taken over, apparently unable to look away from the impending disaster. Each platform carries enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag. Excellent, Marcus said, studying the tactical display with the same expression most people reserve for birthday presents. Amy, how are we doing on network access? Complete infiltration of their command structure, Amy replied, her fingers dancing across controls that now pulsed with energies that made my eyes water. I have access to everything from fleet communications to individual ship life support systems. Want me to start with something subtle? Nothing subtle about this, Sarah said, looking up from her analysis of the enemy formation. They brought everything they have. Time to show them why that was a mistake. David Torres had returned from his hunting expedition 12 hours earlier, and I still shuddered at the memory of his debriefing. 17 separate convoy attacks across 4 star systems, each one more devastating than the last, culminating in what he had casually described as a little demonstration involving the complete vaporization of a Krillian supply depot that had been hidden inside an asteroid field. Phase 1 is complete, he had reported to Marcus. Their logistics network is gone, their supply lines are in chaos, and their commanders are scared enough to make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Marcus had asked. David's grin had been the stuff of nightmares. The kind where they bring their entire fleet to one place because they think it will keep them safe. Now, watching 8,000 alien warships arranged in what their computers probably told them was an impregnable formation, I finally understood what David had meant. The Krillians had made the classic military blunder of gathering all their forces in one location, making them vulnerable to exactly the kind of coordinated attack that humans apparently specialized in. Elena, Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone of someone giving a routine work assignment. You may begin psychological operations. Elena's smile could have flash-frozen a star. Broadcasting on all frequencies, she announced, touching something that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Ladies and gentlemen of the Krillian Empire, welcome to Terra. The main display lit up with translated responses from the enemy fleet. Confusion, anger, demands for clarification. 8,000 ship commanders all talking at once, trying to understand what they were hearing. Terra does not exist in this region of space, came one voice, sharp with biomechanical authority. Terra, Elena replied pleasantly, is not a place. Terra is a state of mind, and right now you are all thinking like prey. The chatter from the Krillian fleet shifted, confusion giving way to outrage. But I could hear something else underneath the anger. Fear. These were commanders who had spent decades conquering galaxy after galaxy, and they were starting to realize they might have met something they did not understand. Jake, Marcus said, conversationally, would you please show our guests what we have done with their network security? With pleasure, Jake replied. And suddenly every screen in the command center was filled with what looked like the internal systems of Krillian warships. Life support readouts, weapon status displays, engineering reports. We were looking inside their fleet in real time. This is impossible, came a panicked voice from the enemy communications. Our networks are quantum encrypted with biomechanical interfaces. No alien technology can penetrate. Jake touched something, and suddenly the lights on one of the Krillian dreadnoughts went out, then back on, then off again. Your network security, Amy said helpfully, was designed by a species that never had to deal with humans. We have been breaking quantum encryption since before we learned to travel between stars. Your biomechanical interfaces are cute, but we have been fighting artificial intelligences for decades. The Krillian fleet formation began to shift, ships moving into defensive positions as their commanders realized they were facing something unprecedented. But their movements were too slow, too predictable, too dependent on the kind of conventional tactics that had worked against every other species they had encountered. Sarah, Marcus said, you may initiate Phase 2. Sarah touched her console and our own fleet began to move. 800 ships against 8,000, advancing with a coordination that I had never seen before. But as I watched our vessels accelerate toward the enemy formation, I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. Our ships were moving in ways that should have been impossible. The ISS Starwind flickered in and out of existence, appearing in 3 different locations simultaneously before settling on a trajectory that curved through what looked like empty space. The heavy cruiser Galactic Pride was somehow moving faster than light without entering hyperspace, leaving a trail of distorted space-time that made my eyes hurt to look at. What have you done to our ships? Admiral Zoid Moore whispered. We upgraded them, David replied simply. Temporal displacement drives, quantum probability engines, localized reality anchors, standard Terra-class modifications. Those technologies do not exist. Dr. Yelp9 protested from where she was monitoring the modifications with growing horror. They do now, Amy said cheerfully. Amazing what you can accomplish when you stop worrying about paradox equations and start focusing on practical applications. The Krillian fleet opened fire first, which was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. 8,000 ships unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize solar systems, biomechanical weapons that twisted space itself into deadly configurations, psionic attacks that could drive entire crews insane. It was the most devastating opening salvo in the history of galactic warfare. It missed completely. Temporal displacement is a wonderful thing, Sarah observed, watching as plasma beams and psionic lances passed harmlessly through empty space where our ships had been microseconds earlier. Hard to hit a target that exists 3 seconds in the future. Our counterattack began before the Krillians had finished firing. 800 ships moving with inhuman precision, striking at weak points in the enemy formation that should have been impossible to identify. But the humans had spent hours analyzing every aspect of Krillian technology, and they had found weaknesses that no one else had ever thought to look for. Biomechanical fusion reactors, Jake explained as our weapons tore through Krillian shields like they were made of paper. Brilliant design, very efficient. Completely stable under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, they have a critical vulnerability to quantum resonance feedback. I watched a Krillian dreadnought, a ship that had single-handedly conquered entire star systems, simply ceased to exist as its reactor turned itself inside out. Psionic warfare systems, Elena added, as enemy mind control beams turned back on their own ships. Impressive range, devastating psychological impact, but they rely on quantum entanglement networks that can be redirected. Another dozen Krillian warships opened fire on their own fleet, as their psionic systems turned against them. Adaptive armor plating, David noted, as our modified weapons carved through defensive systems that had been considered impenetrable. Self-repairing, energy-absorbing, highly effective against conventional attacks, completely useless against weapons that fire ammunition backwards through time. The Krillian formation began to collapse. Ships that had never retreated from any battle were falling back in disorder, their commanders screaming contradictory orders as they tried to deal with weapons and tactics that violated everything they understood about warfare. "This is impossible," came a desperate transmission from what I assumed was their fleet commander. "Your weapons cannot function as described. Your ships cannot move in those patterns. Your technology violates fundamental physical laws." Marcus leaned back in his chair, and I swear I could see him enjoying himself. "Commander," he said, his voice carrying easily across the communication channel, "let me explain something about humans. We have been fighting each other for our entire history. Not just battles, not just wars, but total conflicts where the survival of our species was at stake. We have developed weapons that can end civilizations and tactics that can break armies that outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Another wave of Krillian ships simply vanished as our temporal weapons continued their impossible assault. We come from a world that spends every day trying to kill us. Our gravity is crushing. Our weather is violent. Our biology is designed for survival in conditions that would murder most galactic species. We call our planet Terra, but the rest of the universe has a different name for it. The Krillian retreat was becoming a rout. Thousands of ships fleeing in all directions, their formation completely shattered. Their commanders no longer even trying to maintain tactical coordination. "They call it a death world," Marcus continued, his voice never losing that casual conversational tone, "because nothing that evolves there should be able to survive anywhere else. But we do not just survive. We excel. We adapt. We overcome." The 40 planetary assault platforms, the weapons designed to sterilize entire worlds, turned their guns on each other as Amy worked her electronic warfare magic on their targeting systems. "And when someone makes the mistake of summoning us to their war," Marcus concluded, "we do not just help them win. We help them end it. Permanently." The last of the Krillian fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a debris field that stretched across half the star system. 8,000 ships reduced to scrap metal and radiation signatures, the largest military force in galactic history, destroyed in less than 4 hours by 800 modified vessels crewed by people who had learned warfare from the humans. "Phase 3, Marcus announced. Jake, you have the coordinates for their home systems? All of them, Jake confirmed. 17 core worlds, 43 colony systems, industrial infrastructure scattered across 12 sectors. Sarah, how long to modify our fleet for extended operations? Give me 6 hours, Sarah replied. I want to upgrade the temporal displacement systems for long-range deployment. Extended operations? Admiral Zockmore asked in a voice that had gone very small. Alina looked up from her console, where she was apparently tracking the retreating Krillian survivors. We are going to follow them home, she explained patiently. All of them. Every base, every colony, every shipyard, every military installation. You are going to invade the Krillian Empire? Dr. Yelp9 whispered. Invade, Amy laughed. A sound that made the air itself seem colder. Honey, we are not going to invade them. We are going to demonstrate why summoning Deathworlders is never ever a good idea. David was already pulling up star charts, marking targets with the casual efficiency of someone planning a shopping trip. 17 core worlds should take about a week, he mused. Assuming we want to be thorough about the infrastructure demolition. We want to be very thorough, Marcus confirmed. I want every species in the galaxy to know exactly what happens when you mistake humans for manageable allies. And that was when I finally understood the true scope of what we had unleashed. We had not summoned 6 warriors to help us fight a war. We had summoned 6 representatives of a species so utterly, completely, fundamentally dangerous that their very existence rewrote the rules of galactic conflict. We had summoned creatures from a world so hostile that it had forged them into living weapons, being so adapted to violence and survival that they treated the destruction of entire civilizations as routine military operations. We had summoned humans, and now they were going to do what humans do best. They were going to win. Not just our war, not just this battle, but every conflict that might threaten us for the next 1,000 years. They were going to hunt down every remnant of the Krillian Empire and demonstrate to the galaxy exactly why their species had survived on a death world. As I watched them plan the systematic demolition of an interstellar empire with the same casual efficiency they had shown when upgrading our technology, I realized that Admiral Zockmore had been asking the wrong question earlier. He had asked what we had done. The real question was what we had become. Because we were no longer just another galactic civilization struggling to survive, we were the species that had successfully summoned humanity. We were the beings who had proven that we could work with Deathworlders and live to tell about it. We were, whether we wanted to be or not, the most terrifying military alliance in the history of the galaxy. And as I listened to Marcus Kane casually discuss the complete eradication of the Krillian Empire, like he was planning a routine training exercise, I realized that hiding in ventilation shafts was probably going to become a regular part of my life. Because when humans decide to help you win a war, they do not stop until they have won every war you might ever have to fight. HFY, Marcus called out, somehow knowing exactly where I was hiding despite the fact that I had been completely silent. You can come out now. We are going to need someone to handle the diplomatic paperwork. Diplomatic paperwork? I asked, dropping down from my hiding place. Marcus smiled that terrifying human smile one more time. Someone needs to formally accept the surrender of every remaining Krillian colony. And then we need to draft new galactic accords, making it very clear what happens to species that threaten our allies. Our allies, I repeated weakly. Congratulations, Elena said cheerfully. You are now under the protection of the Terran Federation, population approximately 8 billion humans who really enjoy solving problems with overwhelming violence. And that is how I learned that there are fates worse than being conquered by the Krillian Empire. Like being rescued by humanity.